Thank you for your beautiful words, Ilana and Ariella. One of the amazing things about graduation is when the same themes and stories keep repeating over and over again, and you begin to get a real feel for this class. And my remarks will be no different. Friends, parents, grandparents, family members, colleagues, esteemed guests, my dear students. I've been thinking a lot over the past few weeks about why the class of 2015 tugs at my heartstrings so much. Your intellects are powerful and your talents are vast. Your contributions to GAN have been many, and your legacy will be felt for years to come. But what is it that moved me and so many of us so deeply when you played that song from Boyhood Thursday night as we huddled in the Beit Midrash, parents, grandparents, teachers, and you, arm in arm with one another? And then I recalled a talk that Rabbi Shai Held recently gave, in which he made a provocative claim. He said, everyone is talking about thought leadership these days, but the Jewish community and the world don't need more thought leaders. We need more heart leaders. He added that Judaism asks us both to care deeply and to act concretely to help ameliorate suffering. I think this term, heart leader, captures beautifully the people you are and the legacy you are leaving at GAN. So I'd like to take a few minutes this morning to unpack it in light of what I see as three defining features of your class: compassion, creativity, and activism. How do these three relate to one another, and what do they have to do with being a heart leader? One of your teachers recently said to me about your class, in addition to all of their amazing talents and accomplishments, this is a nice class. Now, nice could mean that you're polite, that you always get along, that you don't push boundaries, that you avoid conflict, that you don't say hard things, but I think we've already heard today, and you and probably your families will agree that this was not what she meant by nice. No, I think she was observing something deeper, a desire to see one another, to support one another, to empathize with one another. She was describing what our Jewish Musar tradition would call a midah, a character trait or an inner quality of chesed, compassion. We've already heard this story today, and I've told it before, but you'll have to forgive me because I'm going to tell it one more time from my eyes. That day after the riots in Ferguson, Missouri, our student body president invited anyone who wanted to process the events to join him in the Beit Midrash during lunch. Now, from my perspective, I have to admit I was a little worried that no one would show up. So I went to the Beit Midrash to show my support. When I arrived just 2 minutes late, there were over 60 students sitting in a circle with so many of you as the leaders and the role models. The thoughts and feelings you shared that day blew me away. You asked questions about the case with humility rather than leaping to overconfident judgments about details you did not know. And at the same time, your empathy, your willingness to, or perhaps your inability not to, walk in the shoes of those less fortunate than you was astounding. Your tears that day bore witness to what I see as an essence of your class. You see and you feel so deeply the brokenness of the world. With this midah of compassion and your capacities to see and to feel, you are walking in the spiritual footsteps of our forefather Abraham. In an effort to explain why Abraham merited his initial calling from God, our rabbis compare him to a person who was traveling from place to place. The person saw a tower in flames and wondered, is it possible that this tower has no one to look over it? At that moment, the owner of the tower peered out and said, I am the owner of the tower. So too, the Midrash goes, Abraham looked at our world, our imperfect world, and wondered, is it possible that our world has no one to look over it? Only then did God appear to him and say, I am the owner of this world. Lech lecha, go forth. You will be the father of my nation. How many other people walked by that burning tower without saying a word? How many people avert their eyes or simply do not see the brokenness and suffering around them? What made Abraham unique and what earned him calling from God was his ability or his willingness to see, to feel, and to cry out. I can picture the tears in his eyes and the righteous indignation with which Abraham asked that question, who is in charge here? And this is exactly what God was waiting for, a partner who would have enough compassion to see and to feel and to respond to God's unfinished world. Hundreds of years later, a similar scene occurs, but this time not with a burning tower, instead a burning bush. Moshe too wanders through the wilderness, and he too looks carefully enough to see. Hasne bo'er ba'esh v'hasne einenu ukal. The bush was on fire, but it was not being consumed. Moshe turned off his path to look even more closely, and only then, the Torah tells us, does God speak to him, and thus sets in motion the story of our redemption. How many other people walked past that bush without noticing its miraculous nature? Once again, God was waiting for the one who would see the burning bush as he saw the suffering of his brothers and sisters at the hands of the Egyptian taskmasters. Both of these stories teach us that God is waiting for people, for heart leaders, who have the compassion to see and to feel the suffering of others in the world. God is waiting for you, class of 2015. When you have the spiritual and emotional capacity to know that the world as it is far from the world as we know with every fiber of our being it can and should be, you feel what Parker Palmer calls the tragic gap. Many people, Parker observes, flip out on either side of that gap. On the side of irrelevant optimism, everything will be fine. Or on the side of corrosive cynicism, there's nothing any of us can do about it anyway. Heart leaders, however, have the patience and the compassion to live, work, and lead in that gap. Staying present, positive, and hopeful are necessary if you're going to do the sacred work of repairing our world. It can be much easier to be naively optimistic or popularly cynical. But both of these character traits take you out of the game of leadership. And they're not that fun to be around either. Instead, you've got to have heart to stay in the gap long enough to close it. Graduates, so many of you wrote in your paragraphs about taking risks and going outside of your comfort zones in order to find your voices, about discovering who you are and learning to be true to yourselves even when the world wants you to be someone else. I hope this sense of self brings you great pride and joy as you celebrate this milestone today. And I want to tell you that it's precisely this sense of self that will give you the courage and strength to face challenges ahead. I wish I could tell you today that there won't be any challenges and there won't be any heartbreak. But I think Parker Palmer captures the reality of life and leadership with beautiful honesty when he writes the following: if you hold your knowledge of self and world wholeheartedly, your heart will at times get broken by loss, failure, defeat, betrayal, death. What happens next in you and in the world depends on how your heart breaks. If it breaks apart into 1,000 pieces, the result may be anger, depression, disengagement. If it breaks open into greater capacity to hold the complexities and contradictions of human experience, the result may be new life, and I would add creativity, activism, and hope. Politics in the hands of those whose hearts have been broken open, not apart, helps us hold our differences creatively and use our power courageously for the sake of a more equitable, just, and compassionate world. Dr. Golden once described your class to me and said, "When I think about this class, I almost feel like the 60s are still alive." Instead of resorting to cynicism, except on occasion, you've written poetry and journalism. You've learned new instruments and written code. You've philosophized. You've added your voices to Talmudic conversations. You've built go-karts. You've formed birds out of recycled wrappers. To me, it's no coincidence that the Red Curtain Drama Club put on the musical Spelling Bee, an expose on adolescent life and race to nowhere culture that addresses such serious topics with honesty, humor, and hope during your senior year. Graduates, I believe that it is your very compassion and the moments when your hearts have broken open, not to pieces, that have fueled your extraordinary creativity and activism. As Rabbi Held put it, Judaism asks us both to care deeply and to act concretely. The link between caring and acting explains why you've started or revived 12 different clubs during the past 4 years, many of which, like the Tikkun Olam Union or Femininjas or the many others you spoke about, have explicitly focused on shrinking the tragic gaps in our world. Heart leaders are moved to act from places of passion and personal authenticity. Graduates, it's not only God who needs your help to repair our world. The Jewish people and our American democracy are waiting for you as well. A contemporary author named Terry Tempest Williams wrote, "The human heart is the first home of democracy. It's where we embrace our questions. Can we be equitable? Can we be generous? Can we listen with our whole beings, not just our minds, and offer our attention, not just our opinions? And do we have enough resolve in our hearts to act courageously, relentlessly, without giving up ever, trusting our fellow citizens to join with us in our determined pursuit of a living democracy?" Listening, generous, whole beings. This is the work of more than the mind. This is the work of the heart, of heart leadership and heart citizenship. And don't think that this work is soft or light. This work of the heart is not touchy-feely. Listen to William's words: resolved, courageous, relentless, determined. This is rigorous, intellectual, moral, and spiritual work of balancing humility with passionate conviction, of acting with courage on behalf of our ideals while making space for others' ideals, experiences, and points of view. And one other unforgettable story from this year happened when you modeled this for us, as we already heard about this morning, with a different kind of activism. You had the courage to initiate and take part in that silent conversation about Israel in response to that one piece of student artwork. In the aftermath of this summer's Gaza war, in the face of so much heartbreak and fear about Israel, the Jewish people, and the world, at a time when there is so much shouting and so little listening, when civil discourse and simple tolerance for divergent opinions are rare, let alone pluralistic communities built on the values of compassion and empathy, you led our student body through a silent conversation that spoke loudly and clearly about the community we have the potential to be and the democracy we have the potential to restore. Class of 2015, what a 4-year journey it's been. It's had its ups and downs, moments of sheer joy and great humor, as well as frustration and, yes, even heartbreak. As I reflect on all you've done and as I look out at the people you've become, I want to thank you for helping me understand what heart leadership is all about. I wish you a lifetime of joy and success as you define it. May you continue to see and to feel, to create and to act with both compassion and generosity, as well as with courage and resolve. The world needs you. We love you and we'll miss you. Mazal Tov.